Hi, welcome to Grammar Compass with Sir Victor. Let us master English language together. Kindly reach out to us via our social media handles on the screen.
The clause. In this lesson, we are going to demystify the concept of a clause, and then we will talk about the subject as a clause element. Let us get straight into the lesson. What is a clause? A clause is a group of words with a verb in its structure. So whenever you have a group of words and it contains a verb, then that group of words is a clause. Let us look at this example. I enjoy reading novels. We can say this is a clause. Why? Because it contains a verb. Although it was late, this is also a clause because it contains a verb. That I borrowed from the library. This is a clause because it contains the verb borrowed. When the sun sets. This is a clause because it contains a verb. That hard work leads to success. That hard work leads to success is a clause because it contains a verb. Who helped me with my project is also a clause because it contains a verb. We can conclude that the presence of a verb in a group of words makes it a clause. However, look at these sentences. A beautiful sunset. Do you have a verb? No. This is not a clause. It has no verb in it. After the meeting, is this a clause? No, it contains no verb. An interesting event, is this a clause? No. As quickly as possible. Can you spot a verb? No. Therefore, it is not a clause. The house on the hill. Do you see a verb? No. Therefore, we can't call this a clause. In great haste. Is there a verb? No. Since there are no verbs in these groups of words, we cannot call them clauses. We will rather call them phrases. But these on the left-hand side are clauses because they contain verbs. Not all these clauses make sense. Some of them, they cannot stand on their own as a sentence. For example, although it was late, cannot stand on its own as a sentence. When the sun sets, cannot stand on its own as a sentence. But I enjoy reading novels is a complete sentence. Therefore, whenever you have a clause that makes sense and can stand on its own, we call it an independent clause or a simple sentence. Now that we know what clauses are, what are clause elements? These are the syntactic roles that words and phrases perform in explicit context. What we mean is that we put words together to form a sentence, and sometimes the words that we put together also form phrases, and the roles or the functions that the phrases perform is what we term as a clause element. So whenever we have a phrase, the function that it performs in the sentence is what we call a clause element. We have 5 clause elements. A phrase can function as a subject, so a subject is a clause element. A phrase can function as a verb, so the verb is a clause element. The phrase can also function as an object, so the object is a clause element. The phrase can also function as a complement. Therefore, a complement is a clause element. A phrase can also function as an adjunct. Therefore, an adjunct is a clause element. The roles that phrases perform in a sentence are what is termed as a clause element. Let us use these examples to explain what we are saying over here. In this sentence, the boy ran very quickly. We can see 3 phrases. We can see a noun phrase, the boy. We can see a verb phrase, run. And we can see an adverb phrase, very quickly, which is giving us information about how the action is performed. These three phrases are performing some syntactic roles, and the roles that they are performing are what we call clause elements. So what are the roles that these phrases are performing in the sentence? The boy that we saw over here, which was our noun phrase, is performing the function of the subject. So the boy is the subject in the sentence. Therefore, subject is a clause element because it is a function that the boy is playing. Run, which was our verb phrase, is performing the role of a verb. Therefore, verb is part of clause elements. Very quickly, the adverb phrase that we saw over here is performing the role of an adjunct. Adjunct is also a clause element. Another example, the young girl has become a doctor. The young girl is a noun phrase. Has become is our verb phrase. A doctor is our noun phrase, and they are performing some roles. What are their roles? The young girl is functioning as the subject. Has become, which is our verb phrase, is functioning as the verb. A doctor, which is also a noun phrase, is functioning as the complement. Therefore, we can say that subject, verb, complement, adjuncts are clause elements because they are the roles that these phrases perform in a sentence. Let us have another example. The old man purchased a car. We see three phrases in the sentence. The first one, the old man, which is a noun phrase, is performing the role of a subject. Purchased, which is our verb phrase, is performing the role of a verb. A car, which is our noun phrase, is performing the role of an object. Therefore, subject, verb, and object are roles that these phrases perform. And the roles that the phrases perform are what we call clause elements. In the last sentence, we have during the event, which is a prepositional phrase, is performing the role of an adjunct because it is giving us information about time. Jones, which is our noun phrase, is performing the role of the subject. Felt, which is our verb phrase, is performing the role of a verb. Worried, which is our adjective phrase, is performing the role of a complement. In conclusion, clause elements are the roles that phrases perform in a sentence. How many clause elements did you count over here? In English, we have 5 clause elements, and they are the subject, the verb, the object, the complement, and the adjunct, and they are usually represented with a capital S for subject, a capital V for a verb, a capital O for object, capital C for complement, and capital A for adjunct. Now that we know the 5 clause elements, in the next lesson, we will talk about the subject as a clause element. See you in the next video. What is a subject? Let's look at this example. My grandmother cooks well. In this sentence, there is an action word that is cooks. And who is performing the action of cooking? It is my grandmother. Look at the picture over here. Who is cooking? It is my grandmother. Since my grandmother is performing the action in the sentence expressed by the verb, then we can say my grandmother is our subject. Let's look at the second sentence. Christian traveled miles away. Who performed the action travel? It was Christian. Therefore, Christian is our subject. With these two sentences, we can then say that the subject is the performer or the doer of an action. To identify a subject in this way, you simply ask yourself, who is performing the action? And your answer will be your subject. However, sometimes the subjects do not perform actions in a sentence. Let's have an example. The young girl is smart indeed. What is our verb? The verb is the word is. Is it an action word? No. Do we say we have no subject in the sentence? We have a subject. It means that the subject does not always perform an action. Sometimes it is simply the one that we are talking about. So in this sentence, if we want to identify our subject, we simply ask, who is smart indeed? And what is your answer? The young girl. So the young girl is smart indeed. She is smart indeed. Therefore, the young girl is our subject because the predicate is talking about the young girl. Another one, the room feels extremely hot. Is someone performing an action in the sentence? No. So it means that sometimes the subject is not even a human being. It can be an inanimate object. So, in this sentence, the room is our subject because the predicate feels extremely hot is about the room. What feels extremely hot? The room. It means we are talking about the room. Therefore, it is our subject. You are asked to define a subject. Per these examples, you can say that the subject is the element that performs the action. You can also define the subject as the element being talked about in the sentence. For example, the young girl is smart indeed. What is the sentence about? It is about the young girl. Therefore, the young girl is our subject. Let's talk about the positions where subjects are found. Over here, we can see that all these sentences are statements. They are declarative sentences. If you have a declarative sentence, the subject will always come before your main verb. So over here, cooks is our main verb, and the subject comes before our main verb. Christian traveled miles away. Traveled is our main verb, so our subject will come before the main verb. Therefore, we conclude that the subject occurs before the verb in a simple declarative sentence. So whenever you have declarative sentences, you are going to see your subjects before the main verbs. This is getting very easy to identify a subject. All that you need to do is to find your main verb in a simple declarative sentence. After you found your verb, all the elements that appear before the main verb would function as the subject. What if we don't have declarative sentences, but we have sentences that are questions? Will the subject still come before the main verb? No. Let us have an example. In yes or no questions, the subject occurs after the verb and not before the verb. In statements, it comes before the verbs. However, in questions, it will come after the verb. Is the girl smart indeed? The subject came after the verb is. Therefore, the girl is still our subject. But since it is a question, it appeared after our verb. Does the room feel extremely hot? The room is our subject. And since this sentence is a question, it didn't come before the verb does. It came after the verb. So in statements, the subjects occur before the verbs. And in questions whose answer are yes or no, the subject would come after the verbal element. What if the sentence is not a statement and it is not a question, but it is an imperative sentence? Sentences that give command. The subject in an imperative sentence is always implied. We do not write the subject in a command. For example, eat the food. Do you see the subject in this sentence? No, there is no subject before eat because we do not write it. It is implied. The real subject of an imperative sentence is the pronoun you. Whenever you give an instruction, your subject is you, the person you are talking to. For example, eat the food is equally like saying you eat the food. So in imperative sentences, the subjects are you. However, they are not written, but they are implied. Now that you understand what subjects are and where they can appear in sentences, let us look at the linguistic items that can function as a subject. The first linguistic item that can play the subject role is a noun phrase. So noun phrases usually perform the role of a subject. The clause can also function as a subject. The empty or prop it can also function as a subject. And the anticipatory it can also function as a subject. Let us first look at noun phrases that function as subjects. When noun phrases function as subjects, it can be a single noun or a pronoun. Let us have an example. John loves reading. Who loves reading? John. John is our subject and it is a single noun. Therefore, a single noun can represent a noun phrase functioning as a subject. In this sentence, John is being talked about. Therefore, John, which is a single noun, will function as our subject. Paris attracts many tourists. What attracts many tourists? Therefore, Paris is functioning as our subject and it is a single noun. In the third sentence, dogs bark at strangers. Which element is performing the action in the sentence? So to identify your subject, simply ask yourself, what is performing the action in the sentence? And the answer is dogs. Dogs is our subject and it is a single noun. Books give knowledge. Books is a single noun, and since it is the one being talked about or that thing that performs this action, we can call it our subject. Yesterday was Tuesday. Can you guess the subject in this particular sentence? The subject is yesterday because it comes before our verb, and we are talking about yesterday. In a nutshell, single nouns can function as subjects. So what about pronouns functioning as the subject? What is a pronoun? A pronoun replaces a noun in a sentence. Let us replace John with a pronoun. If we are able to do that, it means that that pronoun will be functioning as our subject as well. He loves reading. John loves reading. He loves reading. What is our subject? He, which is a pronoun. So he has replaced the noun. Therefore, he has become our subject and it is a pronoun. It attracts many tourists. What attracts many tourists? It. So it is our subject. They bark at strangers. What barks at strangers? They. They is our subject. They give knowledge. They has become our subject. In a nutshell, a single noun or a single pronoun can perform the role of a subject. Sometimes the noun phrase wouldn't be a single noun. The noun phrase functioning as a subject can be in the form of a determiner and a noun, and not a single noun. Let us have these examples. Example 1. The cat sleeps peacefully. What sleeps peacefully? The cat. So over here, the determiner or the article the and cat together are performing the subject role. If you have a determiner and a noun, do not underline only the noun and say that it is your subject. If both occur together, they are functioning together as the subject. And you can replace it with a pronoun. You can say, it sleeps carefully. In the next sentence, a student asked a question. Who asked a question? A student. Therefore, a student is performing the role of the subject. And not only student. This book contains pictures. Can you guess the subject? This book. And what is our verb? Contains. That house looks beautiful. What is our subject? That house. Each child received a gift. What is our subject? Who received a gift? Each child. So the subject can be in the form of a determiner and noun. Again, the subject can be in the form of a determiner, an adjective, and a noun. For example, the tall boy won the race. Who won the race? Your answer is the tall boy. Therefore, the tall boy is functioning as our subject. It contains a determiner, an adjective, and a noun, and together we will call it a noun phrase, and it is functioning as our subject. A beautiful flower bloomed. What bloomed? Your answer is your subject. It was a beautiful flower. It tells you that the nouns can come with other descriptions, and all those descriptions will form parts of a noun phrase, and they will perform only one function, which is, in this case, the subject function. This old book is very rare. What is very rare? This old book. Therefore, this old book is functioning as our subject and not only book. That red car belongs to her sister. That is a determiner. Red is an adjective, car is a noun, and together it is a noun phrase. And what is its function? It is performing the role of a subject. Each small child received a toy. What is the subject? It is each small child and not only child. That the subject can be a complex subject such as this. The noun can appear with other units and together they will perform the role of a subject. Sometimes the noun phrases functioning as subjects will not be a determiner, an adjective, and a noun, as we talked about. It can be a very long one.
You can have a determiner, a noun, and a prepositional phrase, and together they will function as your subject. Let's have some examples. The cat in the room sleeps peacefully. What sleeps peacefully? The cat in the room. A determiner, a noun, and a prepositional phrase, and together it is performing the function of a noun. That is the subject function. A student at the party asked a question. A student at the party is performing the subject role. It consists of a determiner, a noun, and a prepositional phrase, which is at the party. This book with green cover contains pictures. What contains pictures? This book with green cover. A determiner, a noun, and a prepositional phrase. Together, it is functioning as the subject. That house over there looks beautiful. What looks beautiful? That house over there. It is performing the subject role. Each child in the class received a gift. We have a determiner, each, a noun, child, and a prepositional phrase in the class, which is giving us more information about the child. So together, it is performing the role of the subject. So the noun phrase can be a very long one like this. Also, we can have noun phrases that consist of determiner, adjective, noun, a prepositional phrase, or a determiner, adjective, noun, and a relative clause, and together they will be performing the same role, and that is the subject role. Let us have an example. The tall boy in the room who came here won the race. Who won the race? The answer is your subject. So what is our answer? The tall boy in the room who came here. So the whole of this is performing the subject role. You can replace it with a pronoun. You can say, he won the race. Therefore, the whole of this serves as our subject and not only the boy. So the noun phrase can be a very long one. So when you have a very long phrase like this, together it is functioning as the subject. A beautiful flower which was planted bloomed. What bloomed? Your answer is your subject, and it is a beautiful flower which was planted, and it consists of a determiner, an adjective, a noun, and a relative clause. This clause is giving us more information about the flower, so it means it is part of our subject. Therefore, the whole of this serves as our subject. This old book in the shop that was bought is very rare. What is very rare? It is this old book in the shop that was bought. You can say it is very rare. That red car which we drive belongs to her. That red car which we drive is our subject. Which we drive is just providing more information about that red car. So it is part of the noun making a noun phrase. Therefore, we have that red car which we drive as our subject, and our main verb is belongs. Each small child that was born received a toy. Who received a toy? Each small child that was born. Therefore, the whole of this is functioning as our subject. So the noun phrase can be a very complex one, like this. You can have a determiner, an adjective, a noun, and a relative clause that is providing more information about the noun. Together, they form the noun phrase, so they will perform just one role, and that is the subject role. So the most important thing is to identify your main verb. Immediately you see the main verb in statements, then obviously whatever comes before the main verb is your subject.
Let us have this exercise. You can pause the video and then finish the exercise. After that, answers will be provided. Do you have your answers now? Let us see the correct responses. In the first one, the merciful are equally important. The merciful is our subject. All that you need to do is to find your main verb, and whatever comes before it becomes your subject. The tall man with a blue hat is our subject, and he is the one that performs the action wave. An unexpected visitor is our subject in the sentence. The student who won the award is my cousin. Who is my cousin? It is the student who won the award, not only the student. So note that if there is a noun and the noun contains a clause that describes the noun, it will form part of the noun, so together they will perform the same function. Does it perform over here? It performs the subject role. Now we know how to identify noun phrases that are functioning as subjects. Let us look at when clauses function as subjects. 4 clauses perform the role of subjects in English. What are these clauses? The first clause is the nominal that clause. This clause begins with the word that. Another clause is the nominal interrogative clause. We call it the WH clause. These clauses normally begin with question words, WH words. Infinitive clauses can also perform the role of a subject. These infinitive clauses begin with the infinitive marker to. Participial clauses can also perform the role of a subject. Participial clauses are verbal clauses. We call these clauses nominal clauses because they are performing the roles that a noun should have performed. It is only a noun that should serve as a subject. Therefore, if any other element is performing the role of a noun, then we will call that element a nominal element. The clause are subjects. Let's start with the that clause. These clauses start with the word that, and it contains a verb in it. Let's have an example. That students use AI for their assignments limits their creativity. Here, there are 2 verbs in the sentence. Can you find them? We have use and we have limits. Which one is the main verb of our sentence? It is the verb limits. Why? Because use is part of that clause. Therefore, it is not the main verb of the sentence. Whenever you have that clause coming before the main verb in the sentence, then the whole of this clause will function as your subject. You can replace it with the word it. Let's try to replace that students use AI for their assignments with the word it. We can say it limits their creativity. Therefore, what limits their creativity? That students use AI for their assignment. So together, this is functioning as our subject. So that clauses function as subjects when they occur before the main verb. Let us have another that clause which is functioning as the subject of the main verb. Thus, the pastor squandered our money, made us furious. What made us furious? Your answer is your subject, and this is what made us furious. That the pastor squandered our money. So together, it is functioning as our subject. That he arrived late caused a delay. What caused a delay? That he arrived late. So this is our subject. And it begins with the word that. So together, it is a that clause. And why are we calling it a clause? Remember, every clause has a verb in it. Over here, that he arrived late has a verb in it. But that's not the main verb of the sentence. Our main verb is caused. So that he arrived late is the subject which comes before the main verb caused. That they agreed to the proposal is remarkable. What is remarkable? That they agreed to the proposal. So together, that they agreed to the proposal is a that clause and it is functioning as our subject. That you remembered my birthday made me happy. What made me happy? That you remembered my birthday. So together, it is our subject. You can simply replace the whole of this with it. You can say, it made me happy. That the weather improved saved our picnic plans. What saved our picnic plans? That the weather improved. So, these are our subjects and they come before the main verbs of the sentences. So note that you can be given a sentence which contains a that clause being used as a subject. Let us look at the second type of clause that can function as a subject, and we call it interrogative clause. This clause begins with words like who, what, why, when, and since it is a clause, they would contain a verb in their structure. Let's have examples. What caused the noise remains unknown. What remains unknown? What caused the noise? Therefore, the whole of this is functioning as our subject. You can replace it with it. You can say, it remains unknown. So whenever you are given a sentence where a clause is functioning as your subject, you are definitely going to see more than one verb because that clause will contain its verb and then we will have the main verb of the sentence. However, in statements, the subjects will come before the main verbs of the sentence. So in this case, what caused the noise will be our subject, which comes before the main verb. In this sentence, who will lead the team is yet to be decided. What is yet to be decided? Who will lead the team? It is yet to be decided. Therefore, who will lead the team is an interrogative clause. It starts with who and it contains a verb, but it is functioning here as a subject. Which option works best is still unclear. We have two verbs, works and is. Which one is the main verb of the sentence? It is the verb is. This is because works as a verb is found in a clause. Therefore, it is not the main verb of the sentence. It is part of the clause. So what is our subject? What is still unclear? Which option works best? How she solved the puzzle amazes everyone. What amazes everyone? How she solved the puzzle. It amazes everyone. So this is our subject. Why they left early puzzled the audience. What puzzled the audience? Why they left early. Let us look at the infinitive clause functioning as our subject. Look at this beautiful young girl over here. She is engaged in an activity. What is she doing? She reads every day. So you can say, to read every day improves your vocabulary. What is the main verb? The main verb is improves and not the verb in the clause. Infinitive clauses always begin with the word to. We call it an infinitive marker because there is a verb after it. So together, it is performing the role of a subject. To read every day improves your vocabulary. To exercise regularly benefits your health. What benefits your health? To exercise regularly. To travel the world is her ultimate dream. What is her ultimate dream? To travel the world. To learn a new language takes dedication. What takes dedication? To learn a new language. Therefore, the two infinitive clauses over here are performing the roles of a subject because they are the ones that appear before the main verb, and these sentences are statements. The last one, to finish this project on time requires teamwork. What requires teamwork? It is to finish this project on time. Next, let us look at the participial clause functioning as the subject. These clauses begin with ing verbal words. For example, reading every day enhances your knowledge. What is the subject? The subject is a participial clause. It begins with a verb. However, this is not the main verb. The main verb in the sentence is enhances. Therefore, this verb here is part of our clause, and the clause is a participial clause, an ing clause, which is functioning as the subject. So this is the activity, and the activity that the girl engages in is what enhances someone's knowledge. Therefore, reading every day is our subject. You can replace it with it. You can say, it enhances your knowledge. Exercising regularly keeps you healthy. What keeps you healthy? Exercising regularly. Therefore, exercising regularly becomes our subject. You can say, it keeps you healthy. Traveling around the world broadens your perspective. What broadens your perspective? Traveling around the world. Learning a new skill takes time and effort. What takes time and effort? Learning a new skill. Studying late at night affects your sleep. What affects your sleep? Studying late at night. You can say, it affects your sleep. So these are how clauses function as subjects in a sentence. Therefore, if you see a clause functioning as a subject, take it as a unit because together with every word that is included in the clause, they perform the same role, and that is, if they occur before the main verbs, that clause will be performing the role of a subject. How does an anticipatory it function as a subject? When clauses function as subjects, you can rephrase the sentence to make it the subject. Let us have an example. What John told you is not true. The subject is a clause. What John told you. We can replace this with it. Whenever you replace clauses with the word it, we will call that it an anticipatory it. So if you do that, then the elements the clause will have to come at the end of the sentence. For example, it is not true what John told you. It has become the subject. When the country will progress is a problem. What is a problem? when the country will progress. It is a problem when the country will progress. So in this sentence, it is functioning as a subject, and it is an anticipatory it because it has taken the place of a clause. To drive home alone seems dangerous. It is dangerous to drive home alone. Or you can say, it seems dangerous to drive home alone. What is our subject? It is it. It comes before the main verb. It has been fixed at where the clause was found. So, it is performing the role that this clause was also performing, which is the subject role. In a nutshell, it can replace clauses, and when they do that, their position will determine whether they function as subjects. And if it replaces clauses in the subject position, we will call it an anticipatory it. What about empty it? When we say it is empty, we can also say it is a prop it. In grammar, if we say empty it, it means that this particular word over there is not a pronoun. It has no meaning. However, it is used to construct sentences. When the word it is used in this sense, it usually talks about weather conditions and time. It is cloudy today. It is serving as our subject. It has no meaning, and it is our subject. It looks misty this evening. It over here didn't replace any noun nor a clause. Therefore, it is an empty it. It is a prop it, and it is serving here as our subject. We can say it is late. It is our subject. It is 6 o'clock. It is our subject. So the empty it can also perform the role of a subject. Let us have a bonus tip for the lesson. The words there and here can also perform the subject role. For example, there is hope. What is the subject? The subject is there. Again, here comes the man. What is the subject? Here. So there and here can also perform the roles of a subject. Now, this is what you are going to do. Kindly pause the video and try to identify the subjects in each sentence. After you are done, you can press play and then move on to have a look at the answers. Congratulations! You've completed your journey on identifying subjects as a clause element. In our next lesson, we will look at the verb as a clause element. Do not forget to show your support by subscribing to our channel. In our previous lesson, we learned about the subject as a clause element. In this lesson, we are moving on to the verb as a clause element, and then we will study the sentences that have SV patterns. What is a verb? You can define verbs in various ways. Let us look at this sentence. Desmond drives a car. What is the verb? The verb is drives. This is because it is the action word in the sentence. Therefore, whenever we see action words in sentences, they are verbs. We can replace drives with other action words. We can say, Desmond washes a car. Desmond bought a car. Desmond pushed a car. Desmond controls a car. Therefore, whenever you see action words in sentences, you can call them verbs. That is why some grammarians prefer to define a verb as a word that expresses an action. Therefore, if you see action words in sentences, they are playing the role of a verb. Other grammarians would argue with this particular definition of a verb. In what sense? Look at these sentences. She is a good teacher. Here, is there an action word? No. We have is as our verb, but it is not an action. In the second sentence, they are in the garden. What is the verb? Are.
which is not an action. He was a great leader. Was is not an action. We were very tired. Were is not an action. The cake is delicious. Is not an action. Therefore, this particular definition of verbs is not that complete. We can add that a verb expresses a state of being. So all these verbs here are expressing state of being. We usually use the be verbs is, are, was, were, am to express states of being. The two definitions given are not complete enough. What about verbs that show perception? For example, I see the boy. We have verbs that also show cognition. For example, I know him. What about the verbs that show emotions? For example, I love my pet. What about verbs that show desideration? For example, I need a wife. They are verbs. Some grammarians prefer to define a verb as a word that demonstrates tense contrast. What do we mean by tense contrast? We mean if we have a sentence, the word that shows present or past tense will be the verb. For example, we always see the moon at night. Which of these words here is showing present or past? It is see. So we can say we always saw the moon at night. What is the past tense for we? It is not a verb. What is the past tense for always? It is not a verb. What is the past tense of the? It is not a verb. What is the past tense of moon? It is not a verb. What is the past tense of at? It is not a verb. What is the past tense of night? It is not a verb. But what's the past tense of see? It is saw. Words that show present and past are verbs. Now that we know what verbs are, let us move on and look at the verb as a clause element. Do you remember the clause elements? 1 is the subject, and we use capital S to represent a subject. 2, we have the verb. We use capital V to represent the verb. 3, we have the object. We use capital O to represent the object. 4, we have the complement. We use capital C to represent the complement. And the last one, we have an adjunct, and we use A to represent the adjunct. Already, we know what subjects are. Now that we know the phrases and words that can function as subjects, the next big question is, which units in a sentence function as a verb? As a clause element, only a verb or a verb phrase can function as a verb. So if the word is not a verb or a verb phrase, it cannot function as a verb. For example, she comes here every day. What is our verb? It is comes. This is a verb. It is functioning as a verb. The subject is she. Another example, we book our appointments always on time. What is our verb? The verb is book. Over here, book is not naming anything. It is showing an action. Therefore, book is our verb in this sentence, and our subject is we. We have the house girl is crying now. What is our verb? Is crying. And our subject is the house girl. The last one, the party has been suspended forever. The verb is has been suspended, and the subject is the party. In a nutshell, if the word or the group of words are not verbs, they cannot function as verbs. Let us move on to the structure of verb phrases as verbs in a sentence. In a sentence, is the verb always one word, or can we have two words that function as verbs in a sentence? First, the verb can be only one main verb, which means it can be only one word. For example, the dog barked loudly at a stranger. What is the verb? It is barked. Therefore, we have only one word, 7, as our verb.
And whenever you have just one verb in a sentence, we call that verb a main or a lexical verb. In the second sentence, she teaches mathematics in high school. What is the subject? It is she. And what is our verb? It is teaches. In the third sentence, we can see one word, 7, as our verb. They celebrated the festival with great enthusiasm. The subject is they, and celebrated is the only verb. In the fourth sentence, the boy threw the ball across the yard. The subject is the boy, and threw is the only verb in the sentence. In the next one, we have we understood the instructions clearly. What is the subject? The subject is we, and then understood becomes our only verb. Therefore, the subject can be just one main verb. Let us look at when we have two verbs, 7 as our verbal element. Whenever you have two verbs in a sentence, one of them will serve as an auxiliary verb, and the other one will serve as a main verb. The auxiliary verbs always precede the main verbs. For example, my younger sister is singing beautifully. How many verbs can you see in the sentence? We can see is and then singing. They are two verbs, and together they are functioning as a verb. So do not expect to always have just one word verb in a sentence. It can be two words, and together it is a verb phrase functioning as a verb. In the second sentence, we have they have completed their assignments. What is the subject? Obviously, the subject is they. What about the verb? We have a verb phrase, two words functioning as our verb. We have an auxiliary verb, have, and then our main verb, completed. So, there can be sentences where two verbs or two words would function as the verbal element. So we have our subject, they, and then have completed as our verb. In the third sentence, all the boys in a room were watching the movie last night. What is our subject? All the boys in a room. And what is our verb? Were watching. It is a verb phrase, and it is functioning as the verb. In the fourth sentence, we will travel to Paris next summer. What is the subject? Obviously, it is we. And what is the verb? We will travel. Therefore, we have our verb phrase, 7, as the verb. The last sentence, our teacher can solve this puzzle quickly. What is the subject? Our teacher. And what is the verb? Can solve. It is a verb phrase which is functioning as a verb. Therefore, you can have a sentence with two verbs, an auxiliary verb and a main verb. There can also be cases where a three-word verb phrase can function as a verb. If you have that, then there will be two helping verbs and then one main verb. For example, she will be attending the meeting tomorrow. What is our subject? It is she. And what's the verb? It is the whole of this. Will be attending. Auxiliary verbs will be and then our main verb, and together it is playing the verb role. In the second sentence, all the students might have finished their homework by now. What is the subject? The subject is all the students. Can you guess the verb? We have three words over here functioning together as our verb. We have two auxiliary verbs and then a main verb. He has been working on the project all night. The subject is he. Then we have a verb phrase which consists of two auxiliary verbs and then a main verb. Therefore, we have he as our subject and has been working as our verb. In the next sentence, we should have prepared better for the presentation. What is our subject? We. And then a verb phrase, should have prepared, which consists of should as an auxiliary verb, have as an auxiliary verb, and then prepared as a main verb. So together, this verb phrase is performing the function of a verb, and we is our subject. Everyone who was hired yesterday has been resting instead of working late. Can you see the subject? The subject is everyone who was hired yesterday. Then we have a verb phrase functioning as our verb. It consists of 3 words, 2 auxiliary verbs, and then a main verb. You can also be given a 4-word verb phrase in a sentence. For instance, the teacher must have been explaining the concept clearly. What is the subject? It is the teacher. And we have must have been explaining as our verb phrase. And what is the function? It is functioning as our verb. In the second sentence, John and Mary could have been preparing for the presentation all day. What is the subject? John and Mary. And then we have a verb phrase which consists of 1, 2, 3, 4 verbs, which means 3 auxiliary verbs and then a main verb. And together, this verb phrase is functioning as a verb. The children might not have been playing outside due to the rain. What is the subject? It is the children. And what is our verb? We have a verb phrase. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 verbs, and then we have 3 auxiliary verbs and then a main verb which is playing. If you look carefully at this particular verb phrase, you can see that there is a word here, and this word is not. Not in English is not a word class. It is a negative particle. It is added to words to make them negative. Therefore, not over here has just negated the verb phrase. So the whole of this is functioning as our verb. Sentence 4. A sudden power outage must have been causing the delay. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. Therefore, 3 auxiliary verbs and the main verb. And this verb phrase is functioning as our verb. The last one, the noisy construction work might have been disturbing the neighbors. Have you identified our subject and the verb? We have the noisy construction work as our subject, and the verb is a verb phrase which contains 1, 2, 3, 4 verbs, 3 auxiliary verbs, and then 1 main verb. Together, they perform the role of a verb. The maximum number of verbs that you can have in English sentences is 5 verbs. You can be given 4 auxiliary verbs and then 1 main verb. And these kind of sentences are less common. The project manager, which is our subject, must have been being pressured by the tight deadlines. What is our subject? The project manager. And what is our verb? The whole of this, because they are all verbs and then they are functioning together as a verb. There can be a maximum of 5 words functioning as a verb in a sentence. Another one, the students might not have been being taught properly due to the teacher's absence. We have our subject and a verb phrase which is functioning as our verb. In the third sentence, the house, which is our subject, could have been being renovated by a professional contractor. So, the verb phrase that we have over here is functioning as our verb. This is the maximum number of verbs you can have in a sentence. Now that we can identify subjects and also identify verbs, there can be instances where you can have only one subject and a verb making a sentence. We will call that sentence pattern SV pattern. Let us look at the sentences that are SV. Sentence 1. A fierce dog barked. What is our subject and what is our verb? We have SV. A subject, the fierce dog, and a verb, barked. There we have it. We have our subject and the action that the subject is performing. In the second sentence, we have one subject and one verb, which means the sentence pattern will be SV. In the third sentence, we have a subject and a verb. Therefore, the sentence pattern is going to be SV. My children which is subject, and then the action that they performed, sleep, which is our verb. A sudden power outage occurs. What is our subject and what is the verb? This is an SV sentence. It means that we have one subject and one verb. So one subject, one verb. The last one, women can talk. This sentence is also SV. Why? Because women is serving as our subject, and then can talk is serving as our verb. This tells you that if you are given a simple sentence, there can only be one subject and one verb. Therefore, for this one, we can say we have SVV. Can is the auxiliary verb, which is a modal one, and then talk is our main verb. Together, it is called a verb phrase. And what function is it playing? It is a verb. So this sentence is an SV sentence. Let us look at the influence of verbs in sentences. The type of verb present in a sentence will determine the function of the words or phrases after it. The verb is the most important element in the verb is like a giant warrior in a sentence. Before we can have a complement, it will depend on the type of verb that exists in a sentence. Before we can have an adjunct, it will depend on the type of verb and the information that those group of words are given about the verb. Before we can get an object in a sentence, it will depend on the type of verb that we have. Therefore, the verb is the most important element in a sentence. In a sentence, if you have transitive verbs like buy, kick, say, give, destroy, it will determine the function of the word that comes after it. For example, she destroyed the city. We know our subject, which is she, and we know our verb, which is destroyed. What about the city? What is the function? Since this is a transitive verb, it will determine the function of the city. I bought him a car. We have our subject I and our verb bought. It is a transitive verb. Therefore, the function of him and a car will depend on the type of verb that we have in the sentence. Not every sentence might contain a transitive verb. There can be instances where the verb type will be a linking verb or a copular verb. For example, the forms of be, is, are, am, and the rest. Become, appear, seem, they are all linking verbs. So they will determine the function of a doctor. In the sentence, she is a doctor. And then the function of sad in the sentence, we became sad. So the verb type that we have will determine the function of the words that come after it. In our next lesson, we will look at the complement as an element of the clause structure, and then the object as an element of the clause structure. Now that you know the units that function as the subject and those that function as the verb, try to write down 10 sentences with the pattern SV.
In our previous lesson, we talked about the SV pattern. If you haven't watched that video, kindly do so. In this lesson, we are going to talk about objects and complements. What is an object? Let us read this sentence. The man slapped his son. In this sentence, clearly, we can say that the man is the subject. Slapped is the verb. What about his son? What is the role of his son in this sentence? In the sentence, the son is receiving a very hot slap. Therefore, since the son is suffering from the action word slapped, we will call it the object. Therefore, we can explain the object as the object is the element that suffers the action expressed by the verb. Let's have more examples. The student kicked the ball. What was kicked? What is suffering from the action kicked? The answer is your object. And what is your answer? The ball. Therefore, we have the student as our subject. The verb, which is kicked, is an action word.
And who is suffering, or what is suffering from the action? It is the ball. Therefore, the ball becomes our object. So the object always suffers from the action expressed by the verb. Let us have another example. Emmanuel purchased a new van. Emmanuel is our subject. Purchased is our verb. This is an action word. What was purchased? If you find out what was purchased, then that becomes your object. So in this sentence, what was purchased? It was a new van. Therefore, a new van becomes the object. We found him. We is our subject. Found is our verb. What do you think will be the role of him? Whom did we find? That person or that element will suffer from the action found, and it is him. Since it is suffering from the action, we will call it the object. That is the meaning of an object as a clause element. It suffers from the action expressed by the verb. This means that if there is no action word in the sentence, then we can't have any objects. For example, the man was a driver. In this sentence, is there an action word? No. Although there is a verb, but that verb is not an action word. Was is not an action word. Therefore, a driver cannot function as our object. All the men are sad. In this sentence, is there an action taking place? No. If there is no action word, then there cannot be an object. Princess became a nurse. Is there an action word? No. Since there is no action word, there can't be an object. This means that it will depend on the type of verb that we have in a sentence, which will determine whether the element after it is an object or it is not an object. Let us look at the conditions which we should take note of if we want to be able to identify objects in a sentence. The first condition is that the object must be a noun, a pronoun, a noun phrase, or a nominal clause. That is the first condition. And it must follow a transitive verb. If an element is functioning as an object, then it must follow a transitive verb. What are these transitive verbs? These transitive verbs are mostly action words, and they require nouns, pronouns, noun phrases, or nominal clauses to complete their sense. Some of these transitive verbs are eat. You will always eat something. Therefore, the thing that you will eat will be your object. Hurt. You will hurt something or someone. Therefore, the thing or the person that comes after hurt becomes your object. Other transitive verbs include say, know, punish, teach, cut, express, kill, push, pull, put, and many others. Therefore, if you find these action words in a sentence, it means that there is a noun, a pronoun, a noun phrase, or a nominal clause which is suffering from the action, and therefore that noun, pronoun, noun phrase, or the nominal clause becomes the object of these verbs. For example, we saw. What did we see? Anything that comes after saw will be your object, because saw is a transitive verb. We can say, we saw Kelvin. Kelvin is an object. A beautiful woman. We can say, we saw a beautiful woman. What did we see? A beautiful woman. Therefore, a beautiful woman becomes our object. Any noun phrase or a clause that comes after a transitive verb or verbs like this will function as an object. For example, we saw everyone. So we are subject, saw are verb, everyone are object. We saw him. Him is our object. We saw what you talked about. What you talked about is our object, because that is the thing that we saw. We saw whom we complained about. Whom we complained about is our object, because that is what we saw. We saw when we will have the test. Therefore, the whole of this clause, which is a WH clause, is functioning as the object because it suffers from the action expressed by the verb. In a nutshell, Whenever a noun phrase or a clause comes after a transitive verb or an action word, that noun or clause will suffer from the action and it becomes an object. S for our subject, which is we, saw as our verb, and then our objects. When there is only one object in a sentence, then that verb is going to be called a monotransitive verb because it is a verb that requires only one noun, pronoun, noun phrase or a clause after it. The sentences that we are going to see here contain only one object. Therefore, the pattern is going to be SVO, subject, verb, and object. Let us have these examples. Let us look at the noun or the pronoun functioning as an object. Example 1. We like talking. What do we like? What noun is suffering from the action like? It is talking. Therefore, talking becomes our object because it is what we like. 2. They met us. Whom did they meet? Us. Therefore, the pronoun us is suffering from met. It becomes an object. Dan drives cars. Dan is our subject. Drives is our transitive verb. It is an action. What do we drive? Cars. Therefore, cars suffer from the action drives. It becomes our object. She sent him. Whom did she send? The answer is your object because him is suffering from the action sent. John bought pencils. What noun is suffering from the action? Bought. It is pencils. Therefore, pencils becomes your object. You said something. Said is a transitive verb. And what comes after it? Something. Therefore, what was said? Something. Something is receiving the action. Therefore, it becomes our object. So the whole of this is an SVO pattern. It contains one subject, a verb, which is an action word, and then a noun or a pronoun as objects. Let us look at noun phrases as objects. 1. We like a handsome tall man. Whom do we like? A handsome tall man. So in this sentence, a handsome tall man is suffering from the action like. It becomes an object. They met all the businessmen. Whom did they meet? Your answer becomes the object. All the businessmen. So all the businessmen is functioning as our object. Dan killed a poisonous black snake. What did Dan kill? A poisonous black snake. Therefore, a poisonous black snake is a noun phrase which is functioning as our object. She sent the boy who won the most competitive game. Whom did she send? That noun phrase will function as your object because the whole of this is suffering from the action that took place. You can replace this with a pronoun. You can say, she sent him. So the whole of this is functioning together as our object. John bought the house which he liked. What did John buy? The house which he liked. So the whole of this is functioning as the object because it receives the action. The next one, you said a beautiful Ghanaian name. What did you say? That thing or that object or something that you said will suffer from the action say. And what did you say? A beautiful Ghanaian name. The whole of this is serving as our object because it suffers from the action said. So our pattern would be SVO. Now let us continue to look at clauses that can function as objects. These are specifically for advanced English learners. Number 1, I know what she likes. What do I know? What she likes. Therefore, what she likes is suffering from the action know. It is a clause. Do you remember our lessons on clauses? If you haven't watched the introduction to the clause, kindly go and watch it. This is an interrogative clause and it is receiving the action. It is suffering from the action, so it becomes the object. He believes that he will win the race. What does he believe? Whatever you say will be your object because it will suffer from the action believe. So what does he believe? He believes that he will win the race. You can replace this with it. He believes it. Therefore, the whole of this is functioning as our object. The whole of this is functioning as our object, and it is a that clause. Anne wondered why the train was late. What did Anne wonder? Whatever she wondered is our object, and this is what she wondered. So the whole of this is serving as our object. Why the train was late. That is what Anne wondered. So why the train was late is suffering from the action wonder. So it becomes our object, and it is a clause, a WH or an interrogative clause. I like to talk about him. What do I like? To talk about him. You can say, I like fufu. I like rice. Therefore, to talk about him is playing the same role as fufu and rice. So it is our object. They discussed what should be done. What did they discuss? What should be done? Therefore, what should be done is a clause which is suffering from the action discussed. It becomes our object. We forgot what the teacher said. What did we forget? What the teacher said. Therefore, what the teacher said becomes our object because it is a clause suffering from the action forget. So we have our SVO patterns, our subjects, our transitive or action words, and then our objects. The last one, they want to see their performance in the test. What do they want? Whatever comes here becomes the object. You can say they want a car, they want a house, they want bread, they want peace. So whatever they want would suffer from the action expressed by the verb. It is a desideration action. Therefore, to see their performance in a test is a clause, a to-infinitive clause functioning as our object because it receives the action. She doesn't want to do her assignment. You can say, she doesn't want a car. She doesn't want a house. She doesn't want a dog. So the function that a car, a dog, and a house will play will be the same function as what this to-infinitive clause is playing. So to do her assignment is what she doesn't want. Therefore, it is receiving the action doesn't want. It becomes our object. So we have our SVO pattern. From what we've discussed, you can see that when we say an SVO pattern, we mean a subject, a verb, and only one object. What if we have two nouns or two noun phrases coming after the transitive verb? Would they be considered as one object? Let us have an example. My father bought Amma a car. Here, we can see that there is a transitive verb and we have two nouns that follow it. We have Amma and a car. Both Amma and a car come after a transitive verb, so we will consider both of them as objects. S, my father. V, bought. O, Amma. O, a car. However, the function of Amma over here is slightly different from the car. In what sense? What was bought? It was a car. Therefore, a car is receiving the action directly. Any noun that receives the action directly is called the direct object. So whenever you have two nouns, the noun that suffers from the action directly will be the direct object. So in this sentence, a car is a direct object because it was the thing that was bought. What about Amma, who is at the other end receiving the car? Amma is benefiting from the action that occurred. She will enjoy the car. Therefore, what will we call Amma? We will call Amma the indirect object. So the indirect object is always a beneficiary, the person that benefits from the action that occurred. The indirect object does not suffer from the action directly. However, it benefits from what occurred, or you can say it is the noun that receives the direct object. In this sentence, what was bought? A car, direct object. And who would enjoy the car, or who will receive the car? Ama, indirect object. The direct object suffers from the action directly, and the indirect object enjoys or benefits from the action. There is something you need to know about the indirect object. It is mostly a human being or something that is animate. We do not use inanimate objects as indirect objects. In our previous slide, we said that when there is only one noun after the verb, we call that transitive verb because it takes only one noun after it. What if there are two nouns after it, just as we have ama and a car? We will call it a ditransitive verb. So when there are two objects, the verb in the sentence is a ditransitive verb because it has taken two objects. Whenever we have two objects, one of them will be direct and one of them will be an indirect object. Therefore, our sentence pattern is going to be SVOO. Let us have these examples. We gave the teacher a letter. We is our subject. Gave is our verb and it is an action word. What did we give? A letter, direct object. And who is receiving or benefiting from the letter? The teacher, indirect object. They sent the man an expensive gift. They are subject. Sent are transitive verb. What was sent? It was an expensive gift. Therefore, this is our direct object. It receives the action directly. And who will benefit from what occurred? It is the man. The man becomes your indirect object because it will receive the direct object. It will benefit from the action that occurred. Steve prepared the guest some food. What was prepared? Some food. It directly receives the action or suffers from the action. Therefore, some food becomes our direct object, whilst the guest who would enjoy the food becomes our indirect object. So we still have SVOO pattern. He brought me a chair. Can you guess the pattern? SVOO. But which of them is the direct object and which of them is the indirect object? The direct object is a chair because that was what he brought. It suffers from the action directly. However, who is going to enjoy sitting on the chair? Therefore, me becomes our indirect object. So the four sentences have the pattern SVOO, subject, verb, object, and another object. So in labeling sentence elements, do not go and write indirect object. Indirect object is not a sentence element. Object is the sentence element. So whether it is a direct object or an indirect object, simply write O as an object because both, whether direct or indirect, are objects. Let us identify the direct and indirect object in this particular image. We can see a man, a very rich man, holding a car key, and this means that he is buying his daughter a car. Now we can see the car in the background. What is the direct object? The man is our subject. What is the action that he is performing? He is buying. And what is he buying? The car. So the car suffers from the action buying directly. So it becomes a direct object. Now, what about the daughter? The daughter will be the one who will benefit or enjoy from the action that will occur. Therefore, the daughter becomes our indirect object. Now that we can distinguish the direct and indirect object, let us look at some situations where the indirect object becomes a prepositional phrase. So the condition is that the indirect object is equivalent to a prepositional phrase when it comes after the direct object. We can rewrite these sentences. For example, the rich man bought the boy a house. Who is benefiting from the action? The boy, our indirect object. and we have our direct object. If we rewrite this sentence, we will have the rich man bought a house for the boy. The rich man will still remain our subject. Bought will still remain our verb. A house was our direct object. It is the thing that suffers from the action, so it is our direct object. We will label it O as an object. What about for the boy? Here we can see that the boy who was enjoying this action has become part of a prepositional phrase. When this happens, the whole of the prepositional phrase becomes your object. So what will be the sentence pattern? The rich man will be your subject, bought your verb. A house, which is the direct object, will be an object. For the boy, which is the indirect object, will be labeled as object. Therefore, this sentence has been rewritten as this, and our object hasn't changed. We have our direct object coming before our indirect object, but in this, we have our indirect object coming before our direct object. So when the order changes, then the indirect object will become a prepositional phrase, and you will label it as your object. Another one, Emmanuel gave Paul a book. Can you rewrite this sentence? You can say, Emmanuel gave a book to Paul. Therefore, Emmanuel becomes our subject, gave becomes our verb. What was given? A book, our object, and who received the book or who enjoyed? To Paul, our indirect object. Here, the indirect object is our prepositional phrase. In the third sentence, we wrote our father a letter. We, our subject, wrote our verb. Our father, indirect object, because he is the one going to benefit. And what did we write? A letter, our direct object. When the order changes, our father will become a prepositional phrase, and we will label it as our object. We wrote a letter to our father. We, our subject, wrote verb, a letter, object, to our father, our indirect object. The last one, Uncle prepared the guest some food. Uncle prepared some food for our guests. Therefore, Uncle remains our subject, prepared our verb, some food our direct object, for our guests our indirect object. Now that we know the SVO and SVOO patterns, try to identify the sentence pattern in these sentences. The first one, the man gave his wife some advice. We met an old English teacher. She bought a book for his daughter. I want to have peace. The wise man in our village built a school for the community. The youngest child brought our visitor a desk. The students said that they don't care about the exam. You can pause the video and write down the sentence patterns. Let us see the answers. The first one is an SVOO pattern. The man, our subject, gave our verb, his wife, our indirect object, some advice, our direct object. We met an old English teacher. We, our subject, met our verb, and whom did we meet? An old English teacher, our object. So we have an SVO pattern. She bought a book for his daughter. She, our subject, bought our verb. What was bought? A book, our direct object. And whom is receiving or benefiting from what action took place? For his daughter. So the prepositional phrase is our indirect object. Therefore, we have an SVOO pattern. I becomes your subject, want your verb, to have peace your object. What do I want? Whatever comes here becomes your object. For example, I want a car. I want a room. I want an apple. Therefore, to have peace is what we want. It is functioning as our object. The wise man in our village built a house for the community. The wise man in our village is our subject because he is the performer. Built is our verb and it's an action word. Therefore, the nouns or the clauses that comes after it will function as objects. So, the wise man built, what did he build? A house, direct object. And whom did he build the house for? Who is enjoying action that took place? For the community becomes an indirect object, SVOO. The last one, the youngest child brought our visitor a desk. The youngest child becomes our subject. He brought. What did he bring? A desk, our indirect object. A desk, our direct object. And our visitor becomes the indirect object. Here we have our subject, the students. Our verb, said. What did they say? Whatever you write is your object because it will suffer from the action say. Here we have a clause functioning as our object. This is what they said, so it is suffering directly from the action. We have an SVO pattern. This is what was said, that they are worried about a test. Congratulations to whatever marks that you got. If you got below 5, kindly take your time, go back and rewatch the video. In our previous lesson, we talked about objects. If you haven't watched that video, kindly do so. In this lesson, we are going to talk about complement function. We are going to talk about subject complements and then object complements. Remember we said that an object suffers from an action. Therefore, before we get an object, there must be an action word in the sentence. If there is no action word in the sentence or there is no transitive verb in the sentence, then we can't have an object. What about complements? What is the meaning of a complement? A complement is the clause element that refers back to another element mentioned in the sentence. A complement does not suffer from an action. Rather, it refers back to another element that was mentioned in the sentence. That is the difference between a complement and an object. Whilst the object suffers, the complement does not suffer. It refers back to an element that was mentioned in a sentence. For example, the girl became a nurse. We have the girl as subject. Became a verb. Is this an action word? Is it a transitive verb? No. So this cannot be an object. A nurse refers back to the girl we are talking about. Who is a nurse in this sentence? It is the girl. The girl is who in this sentence? A nurse. Therefore, a nurse refers back to the girl. It is playing the role of a complement. It is not suffering from an action. There is no action. Become is not an action. Therefore, a nurse is not an object. It refers back to the girl. It becomes the complement of the girl. Another one, Kwame is a footballer. Who is a footballer? Kwame. So a footballer refers back to Kwame. And we don't have any action word. Is not an action word. Therefore, a footballer refers back to Kwame. It is a complement. The man is sad. This is an adjective and it comes after a verb that is not an action word. Therefore, sad refers back to the state of the man. It is a complement. So we have an SVC. The country voted him a president. Now over here we have our subject, the country. Voted, our verb, but it is an action word. Him is receiving the action or suffering from the action voted. So it becomes our object. And a president refers back to the object, which is him. So this becomes the complement of the object. Over here, who is the president? It is him. Therefore, a president here is not suffering from any action. It just refers back to the object. So it is a complement. And him is the object because it suffers from the action voted. We named Gideon our leader. We, subject, named our verb, which is a transitive verb. Whom did we name? Gideon. It suffers from the action, so it is our object. Our leader refers back to Gideon. And what did we say about complements? They refer back to another element. Therefore, our leader refers back to another element, which is our object, so it becomes a complement. The world is a stage. What is a stage over here? The world. Therefore, a stage is a complement because it refers back to our subject. The message was that we should sleep. What was the message? that we should sleep. So that we should sleep refers back to the message. So this is a clause functioning as our complement because it refers back to the message and there is no action word. From these examples, we can see that some of the complements refer back to the subjects and some of them refer back to the objects in the sentence. Therefore, we have two types of complements: the subject complement and the object complement. Let us take them one after the other. As we saw earlier in the previous slide, the subject complement can be a noun phrase, a clause, or an adjective, and it should refer back to the subject. There is also something important that you need to know. It is that the subject complement must follow a linking or a copular verb and not a transitive or action word. Therefore, if you have a subject complement, then there will be no action word in the sentence. The verbs in the sentence must be a linking or a copular verb so that the noun phrases, clauses, or adjectives that come after those verbs will refer back to their subjects. That is what we mean by a subject complement, the complement that refers back to the subject. And these phrases, clauses, or adjectives must come after a linking verb. What are some of these linking verbs? Some of them are the be verbs: is, am, are, was, were, been, being. So whenever a noun phrase, a clause, or an adjective follows the word is, it is a complement. It will become a complement. For example, I am a boy. A boy becomes a complement. They are girls. Girls will function as a complement because they come after a linking verb. So subject complements come after linking verbs. So if you don't see a linking verb, don't think about a subject complement. Other linking verbs are smell, feel, appear, stay, taste, become, feel, sound, remain, seem, keep, stand, feel, appear, turn, prove, go, grow. So whenever noun phrases, clauses, or adjectives come after these linking verbs, they will function as the subject complement and not an object. So take note. It depends on the type of verb that we have in the sentence. If we have a linking verb, then the elements that will come after it will become a complement. But if we have a transitive verb, they will become an object. Let us look at noun phrases as subject complements. For example, this is she. Over here, she is a pronoun and it refers back to the subject this, and it comes after a linking verb. Therefore, she is our subject complement. We have our subject S, V, C. The second one, the man became a doctor. A doctor refers back to the man, so it means that it is a subject complement and it comes after a linking verb. This is not an action verb. If we say the man killed a doctor will not function as a complement because we had changed the verb. But since it is coming after a linking verb, a doctor becomes a complement. So we would have the man as subject, became our verb, and a doctor our complement. And what complement is that? A subject complement, because a doctor refers back to the subject. The last person was Ernest. Who is the last person in this sentence? Ernest. Ernest is who? Last person. Therefore, Ernest refers back to the subject. Subject complement. So we will have SVC. And look at the kind of verb that we have. It is not an action word. It is a linking verb. So whenever you see linking verbs and there are noun phrases, clauses, or adjectives after them, they will function as complements and not objects. The last one, I am your friend. Here we have our noun phrase functioning as a subject complement because your friend refers back to I and it comes after a linking verb. These are noun phrases, nouns and pronouns functioning as a subject complement. What about an adjective that functions as a subject complement? Let us have these examples. The boy looks very handsome. Very handsome is the complement because it comes after a linking verb. And it is an adjective phrase because it contains a degree adverb which modifies the adjective. So whenever you have an adverb of degree modifying an adjective, together they will perform one function. The boy looks very handsome. We have our SVC. My neighbor seems nice. We have SVC. I was interested. We have SVC. These are all adjectives. My neighbor seems nice. So nice here is referring back to the state of my neighbor. Therefore, it is a subject complement and it is an adjective. This means that adjectives or adjective phrases can perform the role of complements. The entire team grew extremely tired. So the extremely tired refers back to the state of the entire team. Therefore, it is a subject complement. And check the verb over here. This is not a transitive verb. It doesn't require an object. It is a linking verb. So this is a complement. Mosquitoes are very annoying. Are is a linking verb and we have an adjective phrase. It comes after a linking verb, so it will function as a complement. He remained calm. Remain is a linking verb, so calm will function as a complement. The students appeared worried. Appear is a linking verb, therefore worried becomes a complement and it is an adjective. The music sounds good. What sounds good? The music. Therefore, good refers back to the sound of the music, so it is a complement and it is an adjective. Let us see clauses functioning as subject complements. This will also give us an SVC sentence pattern. For example, the problem is, who will take care of my children? What is the problem? Who will take care of my children? So the whole of this, who will take care of my children, refers back to the problem. It is the problem. Therefore, it is a subject complement. We have a subject, S, a verb, V, a linking verb, and we have a clause, an interrogative clause, which is referring back to the problem. So it becomes a subject complement. The point was why they should believe him. What was the point? Why they should believe him. Why they should believe him was the point. So it refers back to the subject. Therefore, we have a whole clause functioning as a subject complement. My concern is what made him eat the food. What was my concern? What made him eat the food? What made him eat the food was my concern. Therefore, what made him eat the food is a clause functioning as a subject complement. SVC. The best thing is to move to London. What is the best thing? To move to London. Therefore, to move to London is the best thing. It refers back to the subject, a subject complement, and is a linking verb. Subject complements always follow linking or copular verbs and not transitive verbs. The next one, what we need to do now is to find accommodation. What we need to do now is what? To find accommodation. To find accommodation refers back to what we need to do now. So it refers back to the subject. Therefore, this is a true infinitive clause functioning as a subject complement. SVC. What he likes is singing his favorite songs. Singing his favorite songs is what he likes. Therefore, the whole of this participial clause is functioning as a subject complement. Now that we know subject complements, what about object complements? If subject complements refer back to the subject, what about object complements? This is the element that refers back to the object in the sentence. Therefore, while subject complements refer back to the subject, the object complement will refer back to the object. It means we must have an object in a sentence before we can get an object complement, because that complement will refer back to the object. Let's have these examples. They voted Alvin the president. They is our subject. Voted is a transitive verb. It is an action. And who received this action or who suffered from the action? It was Alvin. Therefore, Alvin becomes our object. The president refers back to Alvin. Therefore, the president becomes our object complement because it refers back to Alvin, which is our object in the sentence. So object complements will always refer back to the object of the sentence. So our pattern will be SVOC. Before you can get an object complement, these verbs are normally used. Let us look at some of these verbs. We have verbs like consider, name, elect, make, appoint, declare, nominate, choose, and many others. So whenever there are such verbs in a sentence, then it is likely that you will get an object complement. These verbs are transitive verbs, and objects will come after them, and there is the likelihood to get a complement after the objects that will come after these verbs. So the same elements that can function as a subject complement can function as an object complement. They consider Mercy a good friend. They are subject. Consider a transitive verb. Whom do they consider? Mercy, an object. A good friend refers back to Mercy. Therefore, we have an object complement. They declare the woman fit. They are subject. Declare are verb. The woman are object. Fit are complement because it refers back to the state of the woman. They made the teacher very angry. So these are adjectives functioning as object complements because they refer back to the state of the objects. So they is our subject. Made is our transitive verb. The teacher suffers from the action make. Therefore, it is our object. And very angry becomes our complement. They made the teacher what? Very angry. So very angry refers back to the teacher. He finds the book interesting. He is our subject, finds our verb, the book our object. Interesting refers back to the book. Therefore, it is functioning as our object complement because book is an object in this sentence. We appointed her the new secretary. We is our subject, appointed our verb, her our object, the new secretary our object complement. Therefore, we have an SVOC pattern. Now that you can identify subjects and object complements, and also objects, direct and indirect, let us solve these questions to end our lesson. The teacher punished a doctor. What is the pattern? It is SVO because punish is an action or a transitive verb. The teacher became a doctor. Over here, we have the same sentence but a different verb. Therefore, become is not an action word. A doctor in this sentence will function as our complement because become is a linking verb. So the verb that you have in the sentence will determine the element that comes after it. So check whether you have an action word or a linking verb before you write a complement or an object. My friend has sent a gentleman. Send is an action word. Therefore, a gentleman becomes our object. My friend was a gentleman. Was is a linking verb. A gentleman becomes our complement. I bought the girls some gifts. Bought is an action word. So the girls and some gifts will be objects. So we have two objects here. This is the direct object and this is the indirect object. So what will be the sentence pattern? SVOO. I knew he was lying. What did I know? He was lying. Therefore, we have an SVO because he was lying is suffering from the action knew. We elected Kwame our chairman. We is our subject, right? Elect is a transitive verb. Therefore, Kwame becomes an object. But what about our chairman? It refers back to Kwame. Can you guess the role of this? It is a complement. You are right. So we have an SVOC pattern. Last one. We made the neighbors very worried. Made is a transitive verb. So the neighbors becomes our object. Very worried, our object complement. I brought chairs for the kids. I, our subject, brought a transitive verb, which means chairs is our object. And then we have someone that is receiving the object. It is benefiting from the action brought. Do you remember? It is our indirect object and it has appeared in the form of a prepositional phrase. So we have an SVOO. Congratulations! In our next lesson, we will look at adjunct function. Welcome to another exciting edition on the clause elements. In this lesson, we are going to look at the adjunct as a clause element. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos. What is an adjunct? Let us look at this picture. What can you say? We have a subject, someone performing an action, but we can add more information about what is going on here. For example, we can add information about how the action is performed. That is the work of an adjunct. It adds extra information about the verb. The adjunct talks about the verb in terms of when, how often, or in what manner an action is expressed by the verb. For example, the bride danced beautifully. Which word over here is giving us information about how the bride is dancing? It is beautifully. Beautifully becomes our adjunct because it tells us how the action danced was performed. Another sentence, the teacher ate the food in the room. We have the teacher as our subject, ate as our verb, the food as our object that was eaten. But what information is this prepositional phrase giving? It is telling us where the action took place. We have the sentence pattern SVO, and then since this is giving us extra information about where the action occurred, we will call it the adjunct. In this sentence, they played the game yesterday. Can you guess the adjunct? Here, we have a word that is giving us information about when the action was performed. That word becomes our adjunct. Can you guess the word? It is yesterday. So we have they as our subject, played as our verb. What did they play? The game as our object. And when was the game played? It is adding extra information about when the action occurred. We would call yesterday our adjunct. My grandmother prays always. My grandmother is our subject. This is the verb or the action that she performs. How often does she pray? She prays always. Therefore, always adds extra information about the verb. So we would call it the adjunct. Practically, that is the function of the adjunct. It gives extra information about the verb, about how the action is performed, where the action is performed, when the action is performed, even how often the action is performed. So words or phrases that give this information would be called adjuncts. Let us look at the features of an adjunct. These features are very crucial to help you distinguish adjuncts from other words and phrases that are not adjuncts. What is the first feature? The adjunct is not restricted in terms of number of occurrences, unlike the other elements, subject, verb, objects, and complements. The adjunct can occur as many times as we want in the sentence. For example, Prince sent his mother a gift. A simple sentence should contain a maximum of one subject, one finite verb, and a maximum of two objects. What about adjuncts? Look at this example. Prince sent his mother a gift kindly in the room yesterday after the party. Can you count the number of adjuncts that we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So the adjunct is not restricted in terms of number of occurrences. It can appear as many times as we want in the sentence. Prince is the performer, our subject. We have our verb, which is sent. We have his mother, the indirect object. We have a gift, the direct object, which directly receives the action sent. Then we have information about the verb. This one tells us the manner in which the action was done. This one gives us information about where the action took place. Yesterday also tells us when the action was done. After the party also adds information about when the action occurred. So the adjunct is not restricted in terms of number of occurrences in the sentence. Let's have another example. Amma became a nurse after her degree program last week at the graduation ceremony. We have Amma as our subject, and it is just one subject. We have became as our finite verb, just one verb. We have a nurse, which functions as our complement because it refers back to Amma. Then we have other information about the verb in terms of when she became a nurse and where she became a nurse. After her degree program gives us information about when she became a nurse. Last week also adds to the information about when she became a nurse. At the graduation ceremony also adds to the information about where she became a nurse. Therefore, we have three adjuncts in this particular sentence. You cannot have more than one subject in a simple sentence. You cannot have more than one finite verb in a simple sentence. You cannot have more than one complement in a sentence. You can have a maximum of 2 objects, but for adjuncts, it can occur as many times as you want. We have just one subject, just one action that was performed, 2 objects, that is the indirect object and the direct object. But we can add different information or extra information about how or where or when this particular action took place. And all of the information that we will add will be adjuncts. To the second feature, the adjunct is optional. It can be removed without affecting the meaning intended, which means that you can remove an adjunct and you can still communicate how you want to. Let's have this example. Prince sent his mother a gift kindly in the room yesterday after the party. 4 adjuncts. This is giving us information about the manner in which the action was done. This gives us information about the place where the action took place. This gives us information about the time of the occurrence of the action. And this also gives us information about time. However, we can remove all of the adjuncts from the sentence and it will still make sense. It will still carry the import of our message. So for instance, Prince sent his mother a gift. It makes sense even without the adjuncts. But let us try to remove the other elements. Let us remove the verb. Can you say Prince his mother a gift? Wrong. Let us remove the objects. Prince sent. Does it make sense? No. Let us remove the subject. Sent his mother a gift. It doesn't make sense. But if you remove the adjuncts, it doesn't affect the sentence in any way. So that is one unique feature about adjuncts. They can be removed from the sentence and it will still make sense. Let us have this example. Amma became a nurse after her degree program last week at the graduation ceremony. Amma is our subject. Became our verb. She became what? A nurse. Our complement. All the following phrases are giving us extra information about when and where she became a nurse. We can remove all of this and we will still have a meaningful sentence. We can say, Amma became a nurse, even without the adjuncts. So all that we are saying is that the adjunct is optional in a sentence. It can be removed and the sentence can still make meaning. Let us look at the last feature of an adjunct. It is very mobile, which means it can be placed anywhere in the sentence. Whether it is starting the sentence, the initial, whether it is in the middle or it is in the final or the end part of the sentence. Let us have these examples. After the party, Bismarck ate the food. Here, the adjunct comes at the initial part of the sentence. After the party is giving us information about the time when Bismarck ate the food. So, it is functioning as an adjunct. Let us have the same adjunct occurring in the middle of the sentence. Bismarck, after the party, ate the food. Where is our adjunct now? It has appeared in the middle of the sentence. This means that the adjunct is very mobile. You can move it to the middle of the sentence as well. Is it possible to move this adjunct to the end of the sentence? Let us see. Bismarck ate the food after the party. When did Bismarck eat the food? After the party. So the adjunct has appeared at the end of the sentence. Let us try to move Bismarck to the end of the sentence. After the party, ate the food, Bismarck. It doesn't make sense. Therefore, Bismarck is not an adjunct. Let us move ate to the end of the sentence. After the party, Bismarck the food ate. It doesn't make sense. It is not an adjunct. Let us move the food to the beginning of the sentence. The food. After the party, Bismarck ate. It doesn't make sense. The adjunct has this special property of being able to move to any location in the sentence, whether initial, middle, or final. So, now that we know how adjuncts behave, let us move on to look at the linguistic items that can function as an adjunct. The first item that can function as an adjunct is the adverb or the adverb phrase. Let us have an example. Yesterday, she worked hard. Yesterday is our adjunct. It is an adverb because it is giving us information about time. Hard is also an adjunct because it is an adverb of manner. It is telling us how she worked. Therefore, we have the sentence pattern ASVA. Yesterday, an adjunct, adverb of time. She, our subject. Worked, our verb. and had are adverb of manner, which is also an adjunct. Therefore, adverbs can function as an adjunct. He laughs loudly outside. How many adjuncts do we have here? 2 of them. How does he laugh? Loudly. This is an adverb of manner, so it will serve as an adjunct. Where does he laugh? Outside. Therefore, this is an adverb of place and it functions as an adjunct. So we have the sentence pattern SVAA. To the next sentence, they visit us often here. 2 adjuncts after the object. Often gives us information about how frequent the action occurs. Often. So this is an adverb of frequency. Then we have information about where the action occurs. So we have an adverb of place over here, which is also functioning as our adjunct. So how many adjuncts do we have? 2 adjuncts. So we have the sentence pattern SVOAA. In this sentence, how many adjuncts can you count? We have 2. Sometimes and softly. So sometimes he speaks softly. Sometimes gives us information about how often the action occurs. So it is an adverb of frequency. Then we have softly, which is telling us the manner in which he speaks. Therefore, it is an adverb of manner. And adverbs function in a sentence as adjuncts. We have the sentence pattern ASVA. The S for he, the V for speaks, and then our 2 adjuncts. In this sentence, he quickly ran home. He is our subject. Quickly tells us the manner in which he ran home. So it is an adjunct. Run is our verb. Home is an adverb of place. Therefore, it is functioning here as an adjunct where the action took place. Let us have the last sentence. The children quietly played. The children is our subject. Played is our verb. But how did they play? Quietly. Therefore, this is an adverb of manner and it functions as our adjunct. So adverbs can perform the role of adjuncts. Let us look at the second linguistic item. It is the prepositional phrase. Prepositional phrases always begin with prepositions. For example, in the house, at the party, during the event, after the game. They are all prepositional phrases. They can function as adjuncts. For example, the cat under the table watched the bird through the window. The cat is our subject. Under the table is a prepositional phrase because it begins with a preposition. And what information does it give us? It gives us information about where the cat watched the bird. It is an adjunct. Therefore, this prepositional phrase is functioning as an adjunct because it provides information about where the action occurred. We have our verb, which is watched. The bird suffers from the action watch, our object. And what is the manner in which the bird was watched? Through the window. Therefore, this prepositional phrase is giving us information about how it becomes our adjunct. So we have SAVOA pattern. Under the table gives us information about where. Through the window gives us information about how. Therefore, these prepositional phrases are functioning as adjuncts. In the second sentence, the hikers, with their gear secured, began the journey. The hikers becomes our subject. With their gear secured gives us information about how they began their journey. Therefore, it is functioning as our adjunct. It is a prepositional phrase because it begins with a preposition. So prepositional phrases can perform the role of an adjunct when they give us information about where, how, and even when an action occurs. Began is our verb here, and the journey becomes our object because it suffers from the action began. In this sentence, in the morning becomes our adjunct because this prepositional phrase is giving us information about when. She is our subject, jogs our verb. Where does she jog? Around the park. So this provides us information about where the action takes place. It is a prepositional phrase which functions as an adjunct. In this sentence, they met them at the library after the lecture. They is our subject, met our verb. Them suffers from the action met, our object. Where did they meet them? This provides us information about where they met them. So it is an adjunct, a prepositional phrase functioning as an adjunct. We have another prepositional phrase after the lecture, and it provides us information about the time of the occurrence. Therefore, it is also an adjunct. The last sentence, with great enthusiasm, we bought a puppy. With great enthusiasm gives us information about how we carried out the action. Therefore, it becomes an adjunct. We are subject, bought our verb, a puppy suffers from the bought, so it becomes our object. So prepositional phrases can function as adjuncts when they provide us information about where, how, when an action occurs. Let us look at the noun phrase that functions as an adjunct. This should also be a noun of time, because adjuncts give us information about time. If it is not a noun of time, then it should be a noun of place, where something occurs. Let us have an example. 2 months ago, we watched a football game. This is a noun phrase, 2 months ago, and it is giving us information about when we watched the football game. So it becomes an adjunct. Then we have our subject, our verb, and what did we watch? A football game, our object. In this sentence, next week, we will begin the lesson. What do you think is the adjunct? It is next week, because it gives us information about time. The old man traveled last year. What is the adjunct? It is last year, because it is a noun phrase giving us information about the time when the old man traveled. So what will be the sentence pattern? Can you guess? It is SVA. The fourth sentence, we won the match 2 weeks ago. What do you think is the adjunct? 2 weeks ago. It gives us information about the time of the occurrence. So we would have SVOA. Now, let us look at the next linguistic item that can also function as an adjunct, and it is the adverbial clauses. These adverbial clauses begin with subordinating conjunctions, and they express varieties of meanings. The driver reported himself when the accident happened. The driver as our subject, reported as our verb, himself as our object because it suffers from the action reported. What information is this WH clause giving us? It is telling us the time of the occurrence. Therefore, we will call it our adjunct. So we have a whole clause over here which is telling us time. And since it is functioning as an adjunct, we will call it an adverbial clause. It is a WH clause giving us information about time. So it is an adverbial clause functioning as an adjunct. In the next sentence, until he brings the stolen book, we will not go. Until he brings the stolen book is our adjunct. What information is this clause giving us? It is giving us a condition. Therefore, whenever a clause gives a condition, it becomes an adjunct. In the next sentence, the man placed the bag where Paul read the book. This is also a WH clause. And what information is it giving us? It is giving us information about where the action occurred. Therefore, we have the sentence pattern SVO as our direct object. Where Paul read the book gives us information about place. Therefore, it becomes an adverbial. It is functioning as if it is an adverb, and we will call it our adjunct. Unless the government pays me, I can't buy anything. What information is this clause giving us? Unless the government pays me, I can't buy anything. It is also expressing a condition that must be fulfilled before the action takes place. So it becomes our adjunct because it is behaving like an adverb. That's why we call them adverbials. They behave as if they were adverbs. Although John is poor, he has built a good house recently. How many adjuncts are in a sentence? We have 2. Although John is poor is an adverbial clause of concession. Therefore, here, although John is poor is commenting about the verb in terms of concession. So it will be an adjunct. And we have our subject, he. Has built, our verb. What was built? A good house, our object. And when was the house built? Recently, our adjunct. In the next one, since we were tired, we stopped reading. What information is this giving us? It is giving us a reason why we stopped reading. Therefore, subordinate clauses that give us reason behave like adverbs. So they are adverbial clauses. And in a sentence, they will function as what? As the adjunct. So we have our A, S, V, O. We is our subject. Stopped is our verb. What was stopped? What suffers from the action stopped? It is reading, which is a gerund suffering from an action. The student studied hard, so he passed the exams. The student becomes our subject because it is the performer. Studied becomes our verb because it is the action. Hard becomes our adjunct because it is telling us how the person studied. But what about so he passed the exams? It is giving us information about the results of the action that took place. So the whole of this is a subordinate clause. It is an adverbial clause because it is giving us information about results. So it is an adverbial clause of results. So all adverbial clauses of results like this one will function as an adjunct in a sentence. It gives us information about the results of an action. The next one, she speaks as if she is the queen. What information is this giving us? It is telling us the manner in which she speaks. Therefore, we have our subject, our verb, and a whole clause giving us information about the manner in which the action takes place. So it becomes an adverbial clause of manner. Intrinsically, it is not an adverb, but it is behaving as an adverb. That's why we call it an adverbial clause. So these clauses behave like adverbs, and they function as adjuncts whenever they appear in a sentence. The last one, Mr. Mponsa came home to settle a dispute. What is the clause pattern? We have Mr. Mponsa as our subject, came as our verb, home as our adjunct, because it is giving us information about where the action took place, adverb of place. Then we have to settle a dispute. What information is this to infinitive clause giving us? It is telling us about the reason why Mr. Mponsa came home. Therefore, we have adverbial clauses of reason. And this is an example. To settle a dispute is the reason why Mr. Mponsa came home. So it becomes our adjunct. Now that we've seen the linguistic items that can function as adjuncts, let us solve these questions. Pause the video and determine the sentence pattern of the following constructions. Let us solve these questions. Here are the answers. We have our A, which is yesterday, adverb of time. We have S, which is the subject, we. We have our verb, elected. Our object, James, because he was the person elected. Then a cause rep refers back to James. So we have our C, ASVOC pattern. Let's move on to this one. We have SVAA pattern. How? S stands for our subject, which is she. Came becomes our verb. Outside becomes our adjunct because it is an adverb of place where the action took place. Then we have when her mother arrived, and it is functioning as our adjunct because it is giving us information about time. It is an adverbial clause of time. Therefore, it functions as an adjunct, SVAA. The third one, every day the men work hard to earn a living. What is the sentence pattern? It is ASVAA. Why is it so? Every day gives us information about how frequent or time of the occurrence. The men becomes our subject, so we have as. Work becomes our verb because it is the action. How do they work? Hard. So this is an adverb of manner. Our a, which is our adjunct. So we have a. What about to earn a living? It is giving us information about reason why they work hard. Why do they work hard? To earn a living. Therefore, it is an adverbial clause of reason. It is functioning as our adjunct. So we have two adjuncts, hard and then to earn a living. In the fourth one, we have SVCA pattern. My landlady becomes our subject. We represent it with S. Has become becomes our verb phrase, which functions as our verb. A dentist refers back to my landlady, so it becomes our complement. Just recently is an adverb phrase, and it is giving us information about time. Therefore, it becomes an adjunct a. So we have SVCA pattern. Let us move on to this one. He usually plays his music loudly. What is the sentence pattern? It is SAVOA. Let us break it down. He becomes our subject, usually becomes our adverb of frequency. Therefore, it functions as an adjunct. Plays is our verb. What does he play? His music suffers from the action play. It becomes our object. And how does he usually play his music? This is an adverb of manner. Therefore, it functions as an adjunct. So we have SAVOA pattern. Congratulations if you got all of them correct. You can rewatch this video as many times as you want. Bingo! We've completed our SVOCA patterns, our subject, verb, object, complement, and adjunct functions. So we are done with clause elements. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to show us some support. Activate your notification button so that you don't miss any upload from the team.